Okay, so this video we're going to talk about soft forks and hard forks. This is something which you will hear a lot in fact, if you do any sort of historic research on Bitcoin and Ethereum especially. So what happens is you have to understand that when a network wants to upgrade its systems, its servers, the software or whatever, if it's a relatively straightforward one, like you're just updating your Windows Defender, etc. In a nutshell, that's what we call a soft fork, where basically you have a block of some sort where you have old rules, as in all the normal procedures in there, and you're basically implementing some new rules, let's say, new software, new rules, etc. So that's basically a soft fork. Everything is all hunky-dory. There'll be like a date where everything swaps over and everyone has to update their wallets or their mining rigs, etc. Yeah, so that's the soft fork. And they happen every now and again. In fact, with Bitcoin, there's a thing called BIP, so Bitcoin Improvement Proposals. So basically the community can implement a proposal which they think would help the network. And if a BIP goes through, then there tends to be a nice soft fork. However, sometimes a BIP is proposed and it's quite drastic. And this is where a hard fork comes in. And so basically a hard fork is where something major is changing. It's like changing let's say you have a petrol car and all of a sudden you're converting it into a diesel car or an electric car or there's a massive change. Well, this is what a hard fork is, and basically it's where the majority of it is new rules with bits of old rules in, if that makes sense. So that's what a hard fork is. Now, a lot of people, there's a bit of a misconception between hard forks and chain splits. So basically what a chain split is when basically the blockchain is simply split into two, and then you get two new currencies. So sometimes there are hard forks where everyone agrees, everything is fine, and so you remain in the same chain. But when you have a contentious hard fork, that's when shit hits the fan. And there are two very notable chain splits or hard fork chain splits. One was with Ethereum and one was with Bitcoin. So the first one was with Ethereum. So what happened is that there was a thing called a DAO, DAO, a decentralized automated organization. And what happened was that there was a DAO hacking, and someone managed to hack the DAO and stole $50 or $53 million. Okay, and everyone wasn't happy because there was some sort of backdoor. And what happened is Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, said, right, screw this, we're just going to do a bit of a reset. So what he did was he sort of wound back time to a state before the hacking, and then they had a hard fork or a chain split. So what then happened was that Ethereum broke into two, and so now this is why you have a thing called ETC and ETH. So you have Ethereum Classic, which was the original one, and you have Ether. Ether Classic, Ether as in the normal one. So this is the one which then carried on and that's what the whole world uses. And what then happened was that the hacker who stole $50 odd million worth of Ether at the time, she or they basically have that amount in ETC. So I wouldn't bother with investing or putting any money into Ether Classic. That's sort of the chain which everyone has just dumped and left. It's quite interesting though, because as the market goes up, everything goes up, and so ETC has gone up. So those stolen Ether is now around $100 million. But the thing is, the guy, girl, or group that stole it can't really spend it because all eyes are on the wallet where the stolen funds are. So yeah, So that is that one. That was where they had a contentious fork. And another one was with Bitcoin. So in fact, let's draw what a fork actually looks like. So let's say you have these blocks, let's say with Bitcoin, and every 10 minutes a new block is released. And at the moment it spits out 12.5 Bitcoin, etc. Obviously I can't draw squares. But what happens, let's say there is a contentious hard fork. So basically, like with Bitcoin then forked into Bitcoin Cash. Basically, there was a massive civil war in Bitcoin on how big the block sizes were. So at the moment, the block sizes with original Bitcoin is 1 megabyte, and what the Bitcoin cachers, the people who supported Bitcoin Cash, they wanted to upgrade it all the way up to 8 megabytes per block. So what this means is that you could fit more transactions in a block because there's simply 8 times more memory, which means you could then basically have 8 times more transactions per second, etc. Because Bitcoin has a maximum transactions of 7 per second, but it averages around 3 to 4 transactions per second, whereas the Bitcoin Cash can do up to 56 roughly, up to 50-ish. But really, I think it's a bit short-sighted because even 8 meg block is still massively inadequate for Bitcoin Cash to be a world currency. So what happened is there was a contentious hard fork, and what happened, and so you then end up with a new chain. So these are supposed to be squares, by the way. There we go. So it's a bit like this, and then all of a sudden. So you then have Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin, and you now have BCH, so Bitcoin Cash, etc. So the interesting thing about these contentious hard forks or these chain splits is that it's a bit of it's like Bitcoin quantitative easing or a form of dividends, because let's say before this hard fork happened you had, I don't know, 5 Bitcoin. What happens is that after the fork you still have your 5 Bitcoin, but what happens is because it's effectively duplicated, you now have 5 Bitcoin Cash. So all of a sudden, you've just got money created out of thin air. And as a result of that, a lot of people have twigged that, oh my God, we can just force a hard fork or a chain split. And then as long as we're holding Bitcoin, we then get the new fork. And Bitcoin has been forked so many times now. We've got Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin Super, Super Bitcoin, Bitcoin Silver, the list is endless, and these are all scammy, crappy cash grabs. Basically, a whole bunch of developers getting together, going, right, let's fork this, let's fork it, yeah. So that is hard forks. Matty, do you have any questions on hard forks or soft forks?
No, I think I get it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and that's really, I mean, as I've said with this course, all I'm showing you are the basic things that you actually need to know. You don't need to go into, what's inside a block, or if there's a thing called segregated witness, or all sorts of other things like that, and what the hashes are and the nonces. You just don't need to know it. So yeah, just an overall broad brush, and yeah, see you in the next lesson.